July 18th, 1944. Normandy. 6 weeks after D-Day, the front has barely moved. Omar Bradley reads the latest figures in silence. More than 40,000 American casualties. The hedgerows are still there. The Germans are still there. There has been no collapse, no catastrophic mistake, just a campaign bleeding time it does not have. D-Day succeeded. The promise was speed. Normandy delivers something else. Attrition without breakthrough. On the maps, the arrows point forward. On the ground, nothing opens. The most dangerous question is no longer where to attack. It is how long this can continue. To understand why Normandy stalled, the story must go back to a promise made before the first landing craft touched the sand. The Normandy invasion was not built on improvisation. It was built on a promise. In 1943, as planning for Operation Overlord took shape, one assumption anchored the entire design. The city of Caen would fall on D-Day. Caen was not symbolic. It was functional. South of the city lay open ground suitable for armor, air support, and rapid maneuver. If Caen fell quickly, Allied forces could break into terrain where mass and mobility mattered. Bernard Montgomery understood this. As commander of the Allied ground forces for the invasion, he personally assured Eisenhower that Caen would be secured on June 6th. Everything flowed from that commitment. British and Canadian forces would draw German armor east. American forces would build strength in the west, then break out. Overlord assumed tempo. Speed was not a luxury. It was the mechanism. Without Caen, the campaign would compress into the hedgerows. Armor would be blunted. Air power would lose its advantage. The plan worked only if the hinge moved. By dawn on June 6th, the hinge was under pressure. By nightfall, it would become the campaign's first fracture. Bernard Montgomery did not approach Normandy as a race. He approached it as a problem of control. His experience had taught him caution. At El Alamein, preparation had defeated speed. Superiority had been built deliberately, then released. Montgomery trusted systems more than momentum. Secure the flanks. Protect logistics, preserve combat power. He believed this approach could absorb delay without risking defeat. Time, in his view, was elastic. What mattered was avoiding disaster, avoiding overextension, avoiding reversals that could not be repaired. In Normandy, this belief shaped every decision. He accepted slow progress if it maintained coherence. He reinforced positions instead of forcing openings. This was not incompetence. It was a doctrine refined in a different theater. What Montgomery underestimated was the environment he was now operating in. The bocage compressed space. German reserves moved faster than expected. Control, without speed, began to create paralysis. The campaign did not fail because Montgomery lacked skill. It stalled because his belief system no longer matched the battlefield. And Normandy would not wait for theory to adjust. June 6, 1944. The landings succeed. British and Canadian forces push inland from the beaches facing Caen. In the early hours, the road south appears open. Then Montgomery slows. Units consolidate. Defensive perimeters are tightened. Momentum is paused to secure what has already been taken. The German response arrives before the day ends. The 21st Panzer Division counterattacks into the gap. By nightfall, Caen remains in German hands. The failure is not dramatic, no rout, no collapse, but the first promise of Overlord is broken. The city that was meant to fall on D-Day becomes an objective for another day, then another. German armor begins to concentrate east of the Allied lodgment. Every hour that passes makes removal harder. What was planned as a hinge becomes an anchor. From this point forward, Normandy is no longer a campaign of execution. It becomes a campaign of recovery. And recovery always costs more time than was budgeted. Between June 7th and June 10th, the situation hardens. What was delay becomes pattern. British and Canadian forces resume their attacks toward Caen. They advance meters, not kilometers. Each push meets prepared defenses, reinforced overnight. German command makes a clear choice. Panzer divisions are pulled toward Caen and held there. The eastern flank becomes a magnet for armor. Montgomery continues to press, but without decisive weight. The attacks are methodical, contained, and predictable. They inflict losses, but they do not dislodge the defense. With every stalled assault, the German position improves. Fields are registered by artillery. Approach routes are mined. Reserves settle into depth. Normandy's tempo slows into something else entirely. A locked exchange of fire. The campaign's rhythm, designed around rapid separation of fronts, is gone. Instead of maneuver, the Allies inherit fixation. Caen is no longer just an objective. It is a sink for time, armor, and attention. By the second week of June, the reality is clear. The breakthrough promised in the plan is not coming from the east, and without it, the burden of progress shifts quietly westward. While British and Canadian forces remained locked outside Caen, the American sector absorbed the consequences. In the west, the terrain closed in. Hedgerows turned every field into a position. Every advance became a short-range fight, paid for in infantry. Armor lost its reach. Air power lost its angles. The advantages that had justified Overlord on paper were neutralized on the ground. Casualties rose without proportioned progress. Battalions were rotated not because they had advanced, but because they were exhausted. By mid-July, the numbers were impossible to ignore. American losses climbed week by week while the front barely shifted. This was not the cost of breakthrough. It was the cost of stagnation. The implication was brutal. If the campaign remained trapped in the bocage, the United States would bleed its way forward without ever opening space. Normandy could not be won like this, not at this rate, not with this exchange. What had been tolerated as delay now revealed itself as danger, and inside Allied headquarters, a quiet realization formed. If Caen could not be opened, the campaign would have to be saved somewhere else. Between June 26th and June 30th, 1944, Montgomery commits to Operation Epsom. This is meant to be the answer. For the first time since D-Day, British forces attack with full intent. Infantry, armor, artillery move together, pushing west of Caen toward the Odon River. The operation creates movement. A salient forms. German reserves are pulled in, but the front does not open. The attack bends the line without breaking it. Panzer divisions absorb the pressure, then seal the gap. By the end of the month, the map looks different, but the geometry is the same. No corridor appears. No operational freedom follows. For Eisenhower, this is the inflection point. Epsom proves that effort alone will not solve the problem. Firepower, applied correctly, is still not enough. This is not a failure of execution. It is a failure of premise. Montgomery is doing exactly what he believes in, and it is still not producing a breakthrough. In those days, Eisenhower does not argue. He does not intervene. He simply begins to accept a conclusion that will reshape the campaign. Normandy will not be won from Caen. By early July 1944, patience inside the Allied command begins to thin. Not publicly, privately. Reports from the East are detailed and precise. They describe effort, coordination, and pressure. They do not describe results. British casualties rise. German armor remains fixed. Caen is still unreachable. In London, questions surface. The press asks why progress looks so expensive and so limited. Winston Churchill's confidence wavers. Then, hardens into irritation. On July 1st, Eisenhower meets Montgomery. The tone is different now. There is no discussion of method, no exploration of alternatives, only a single question. How long? Montgomery answers carefully. He speaks of pressure, of attrition, of inevitability. Eisenhower listens but does not push back. The exchange ends without resolution. What changes is not the plan, it is the expectation. From this point forward, Eisenhower no longer assumes that Caen will unlock Normandy. He begins to consider what happens if it never does. The campaign does not pivot in that moment, but its center of gravity does. And once that shift occurs, it cannot be reversed. Montgomery's answer to the problem arrives in mid-July. If maneuver will not break Caen, mass will. Operation Goodwood is conceived as a blunt solution. Overwhelming force applied in a narrow corridor east of the city. On July 18th, the air attack begins. More than 2,000 bombers cross the front. The ground shakes for hours. Then the armor moves. Hundreds of British tanks advance into smoke and debris. The scale is unprecedented. So is the expectation. But firepower cannot substitute for geometry. The terrain channels movement. German defenses recover faster than anticipated. By July 20th, the result is undeniable. Nearly 400 tanks are lost. The line has shifted, but it has not broken. Goodwood confirms what Epsom suggested. Caen is not a door. It is a wall. The failure is not one of courage or commitment. It is structural. Montgomery has applied every tool his doctrine allows, and the doctrine has reached its limit. At this point, the problem is no longer British execution. It is Allied design. Normandy will not be saved by pressing harder in the east. It will be saved by changing where the war is allowed to move. After Goodwood, Eisenhower stops waiting. There is no formal announcement, no rebuke, no confrontation. The shift happens in planning rooms, not briefings. Operational initiative begins to move west. Omar Bradley is given latitude he did not have before. Timelines shorten. Expectations change. The British effort continues around Caen, but its role is redefined. Fix the enemy. Hold armor in place. Do not break through. In the American sector, preparations accelerate. A new operation takes shape, built around a single requirement: speed. Units are reorganized. Air support is concentrated. A breakout corridor is identified south of Saint-Lô. George Patton is placed in reserve, waiting behind the line. Not as a gamble, as a necessity. This is not a vote against Montgomery. It is an admission. The campaign cannot afford another month of pressure without movement. Time has become the critical resource. By late July, the decision is effectively made. Normandy will be saved by whoever can move fastest, and that will not be decided east of Caen. On July 25, 1944, Operation Cobra begins. The air attack shatters a narrow section of the German line south of Saint-Lô. This time, the front does not bend. It opens. Within days, American forces break free of the bocage. Armor moves into open ground. Command decisions accelerate instead of compressing. On August 1st, the Third Army is activated. George Patton takes command and does not pause. Columns advance beyond expectations, then beyond plans. German units fail to reconstitute. The tempo never slows enough for containment. In 2 weeks, the Americans achieve what 6 weeks around Caen did not: operational freedom. This is not a personal vindication. Patton is not correcting Montgomery's mistakes. He is operating in terrain where speed is finally possible. The consequences are structural. German forces in Normandy begin to unravel. The campaign shifts from survival to exploitation. The delay in the east did not doom Normandy. but it forced a solution elsewhere. And once that solution appeared, the war in France moved forward on entirely new terms. D-Day is remembered as a triumph of planning and courage. Normandy is remembered as a grind that nearly consumed both. Bernard Montgomery did not fail because he lacked competence. He failed because his method could not buy what the campaign needed most: time. His approach controlled risk, but it could not create space. And in Normandy, space was survival. George Patton did not arrive to restore honor or settle rivalries. He arrived because the campaign had reached its limit, because attrition without movement was no longer acceptable. What saved Normandy was not brilliance at Caen. It was the willingness to abandon the hinge when it refused to turn. Eisenhower did not choose speed out of preference. He chose it out of necessity. The lesson of Normandy is not about personalities. It is about momentum. You can win the landing. You can hold the line, but if you cannot move, the campaign will bleed itself dry. D-Day succeeded. Normandy survived because someone dared to go faster than the plan.